Hi, I'm Ben. Welcome to my book corner. We have another book review for you today. This one is for Shy Trans Banshee from Tony Santorella. So this came out on October 2nd, 2025, and the hardback version, which I have, came in at 309 pages long. This is a follow-up to Board Gay Werewolf, so there will be some light spoilers for the ending of that book in here. And if you want to know my thoughts on that one, I shall link in the cards at the top and in the description down below. As always, we shall take a look at the story, characters, world building, and presentation before my final thoughts at the end, so let's dive straight in. Alright, so the story for this takes place a number of months after the end of Board Gay Werewolf, with Brian, Nik and Darby being shipped out to London. They have had some success working for this undercover supernatural crime agency, but they have some interesting methods in achieving their results, and it's kind of thought, or suggested at least, that the powers that be feel like sending them away for a time to a low-risk area may be the best course of option. They get to London, and whilst they're there, their main duty is to discover what happened to the previous occupant of their position there who has gone missing. This leads to a number of different investigations, first off into our missing person, but also there's been a number of puzzling abductions within London, specifically of clairvoyants of various different types. All seem to be linked to London's financial district. Not just that, but we also have another character called Maeve introduced, who is also looking for their missing mother. This works really well as a structure for the kind of journey that this group goes through. There's a number of changes in here, and by the end, the status quo is very, very different to the one that we begin with. And you have these characters that are kind of dealing with, first of all, being sent away to just keep them out of the way, because they're also there as a temporary measure until permanent replacements come in, and months later there's no sign of this. But also they're trying to do a good job, they're trying to get acclimatized to a new place and a new culture, and all this is working together to give some really interesting character beats for this group, especially for Brian, who is once again the main character of this one. So overall, you have a good series of central linked mysteries in here that's driving a character narrative. Works really well. Onto the characters then. First things first, this is very much Brian's story once again, and a lot of the focus is on him. We do get a little bit of time with Nik and Darby. It does feel like they're slightly more sidelined in this one than they are in book one, and also the same is true of Abe, who is the partner of one of the characters and is kind of the mentor figure, but they spend a lot of this book kind of off page in other countries and are mainly just seen during video calls and supervising, or more likely asking, what the hell have you done now? Which is very much the chaotic energy of this group. Now, we do get some character development for Nik and Darby. They do very much play second fiddle to Brian. However, some of the time that would have gone to those goes to our new character that's introduced called Maeve. Maeve is a timid trans woman whose mother went missing a few months previously and is trying to track her down. And after a chance encounter with with Brian after an investigation which led to Brian going into his werewolf form, and as you would expect, werewolf form is Hulk mode, which means no clothes afterwards, got more than an eyeful, shall we say, ended up giving Brian her coat, and then getting it back the following day. And over the course of the book, Maeve moves in with the group and actually becomes part of this group's investigations, believing that there may be some links to their missing mother. But a lot of the focus of this is on Brian, and there's a lot in here which works really well. First off, the chemistry between this group is off the charts, and Brian and Maeve in particular are really interesting early on, because whilst it's not hostility exactly, you very much have a territorial thing going on with Brian, and with Maeve coming into the group and feeling really put out, and whilst not necessarily hostile, certainly very distrusting. But also you have this kind of mild character regression where by the end of book one, Brian was a lot more confident, had a lot more self-belief, and some of that is beginning to waver a bit here because of the dynamic that has formed. Brian has very much been relegated to the, oh, well, if you get hit by a bus, you'll heal faster than the rest of us, so you can do the flower deliveries, because the front for this place is a flower shop. And kind of feeling a bit frustrated and a bit pointless and like a liability, which again links back to Brian's feelings in book one as well. And it's interesting that this moving away and feeling like they've been sent away as kind of punishment is having that effect on him. There's some really wholesome moments as well that are kind of linked into humour. For example, if you know anything from the first book, Brian has a thing for bears. By bears, I mean that in the gay sense, in terms of gay slang. And there's a comment early on about him watching bear streams. And it's the natural assumption is that this is going to be something adult. No. He's watching streams of bears trout fishing in Alaska or somewhere, and just really, really wanting to just go and live in the countryside and just live his best life, where he doesn't have to worry about accidentally tearing someone limb from limb on a full moon. And you've got this level of malaise that cuts through, but it's really interesting seeing that level of trust with Maeve in particular develop over the course of the book. And by the end of it, you have a complete status quo change for this group, with Maeve fully brought into the fold. But a lot of things change in the back few chapters of this, which will have massive repercussions, I suspect, in the future books, with character revelations for Nik, Darby, Abe, and Brian sort of coming into trusting themselves a bit more, which is actually really, really sweet and wholesome. So some great character beats in here. Darby very much dominates. Maeve's got some interesting ones as well. But very much Brian is the star of the show here. The physical world building for this is actually relatively slight, leaning on the assumption that we know how big cities works. Where this gets really interesting is looking at the supernatural. You have the wider worldview, which is largely being provided by Abe through the video calls and what they're off doing in the world. And a couple of these actually do link to some little bits and pieces that we discover about things that have happened in London. For example, some stuff about a bar that the crew kind of drink in that had a haunting problem, for want of a better word, and when they figured out what it was, actually ended up linking to something that Abe has gone off to do since then. So you get a sense of this being part of a connected world a lot more than book one did, because obviously we didn't know about any of this stuff at that point. You do get some little bits about the hustle and bustle of London, but you also get the sense of how cosmopolitan London is. Not just in general, but from a supernatural point of view. This is, again, driven home by the fact that the front for this place is a flower shop, and this acts as a business opportunity for the renting out of weapons to monster hunters, for example, or the various witches, or the clairvoyants coming in for certain reagents or ingredients for potions and some such, or crystals, etc. And it really gives a sense of a hustle, bustle, cosmopolitan and fully integrated world, which works really well. But not just that, that goes to London in general. It's a very busy city as a rule of thumb, and you get a sense of scale as they're moving through the city, and the sense of the sort of different areas, from like the Canary Wharf and the financial centres to the sort of more gritty and grimy areas. And also touched on here is kind of the cost of living crisis. The cost of living in London is not cheap, which is true in real life. And you have little references to that as well, just to fill out the world enough for our characters to feel like they're in a living world. And that all works really well also. But also you have these interesting little hurdles that are there, which exist in real life for them trying to find stuff out. You have the sort of these sketchy hardware stores who will probably not do something illegal unless you pay the right money, or they'll just point blank just threaten you. You have the local sort of businessmen who get really upset at you using their bins. These are things you see in real life, which gives it a level of realism to balance those supernatural elements. So overall, whilst there is not massive quantities of world building here, with it leaning on a little bit of prior knowledge, it does enough to make this feel like an integrated and breathing world for these characters to have their arcs in. Presentation then, we'll start with the cover. I love the cover for this one, just like I did for book one. I do prefer board gay werewolves, cover simply because of the neon green, but I really like the neon blue on this and the horrific Banshee face. I will also say the version that I've got, which is a hard cover, the dust jacket is glow in the dark, which is a really nice touch as well. Would show it on camera, but we have lights. You won't see it. So there's that. In terms of the writing, this is a pretty rapid pace. It doesn't take too long to get into the meat of the story, although it does allow the downtime for Brian's more introspective or really stupid moments. And it does at times lean into Brian's stupidity really, really well, with it being the idea of him either charging in without thinking with the barbarian mentality, something that is then touched on and kind of he's needled a little bit with when they play D&D later on in the game, which in the greater game, in the book, which I really enjoy. But also his alibis for why he ends up naked in the street are just bonkers on so many levels. But that kind of leans into Brian as a character, and it's the character work where this really, really excels. The banter between this group of friends works so well. And it worked well because sometimes it kind of pushes the boundary of what's acceptable in a way that you can only really do with friends that really, really get you. And that works really well. It doesn't do it very often, and generally speaking, the banter and the insults are relatively normal, but there's the odd time where it skirts that edge in a way that makes these friendships feel even more believable. And as they have these confrontations and they have their frustrations with each other, the chemistry really does come through. And where this really gets highlighted is when you have Maeve and Brian start to interact, because they don't have any chemistry whatsoever at the start, because Brian cannot get a read on Maeve at all, and Maeve is very much the straight-faced, sarcastic Irish person, very, very much leaning into the idea that Americans don't get sarcasm, which may or may not be true. From my experience, it's not entirely true, but really does lean into that, and Brian's inability to pick up on those cues, especially early on, and seeing that develop works really, really well, because you actually see the chemistry beginning to grow and finally click towards the end of the book. That works really well, and that is the strength of this, the chemistry between the characters. The mysteries are well done. It doesn't leave too long before each step being uncovered, but you also get a sense that they could mess things up at any time. Again, partially because of Brian going all wolfy and charging in like a nut job and eating everybody. Works really well. There are a couple of red herrings here. I will say the big reveal at the end didn't feel like much of a reveal for me in terms of the actual perpetrators themselves. I will say, however, there is a couple of events at the end of this that really did take me by surprise, and I did not expect. So bear that in mind. But overall, well written, great on-page chemistry, great dialogue, and just a lot of fun. This did have me genuinely laughing on occasion, which I've said this a few times this year, but it's rare for books to get me to laugh out loud, and this generally has done in a number of places. So yeah, super quick read, just a lot of fun. So in case you can't tell, I really enjoyed this book. It's an urban fantasy, which is one of my least favourite subgenres in fantasy, because sometimes it feels a bit too close to real life in a bizarre way. A little bit takes itself too seriously, for me personally. This isn't that. This knows exactly what it is. This is an at times slapstick, at times not safe for work, humorous urban fantasy with great chemistry between our core cast of characters, and where that chemistry fails, it's by design, and we see it getting built up as new characters are introduced. It has a solid mystery, it's really well paced, keeps going at a rapid clip. Read this in a couple of days. I liked this a lot. I would probably say that I actually like this more than book one, which is Board Gay Werewolf, just because this feels slightly more light-hearted because of the point that Brian is at in this book compared to the points he hits in that one. We don't get quite the level of spiral that we got in that book. This is someone who's a lot more well-rounded at this point, a lot more accepted, but still has those doubts. And we see those doubts kind of fester a little bit, but get overcome in a way that works really, really well. And this book made me laugh out loud. I like the humour in here. Is it always safe for work? No. Is that okay with me? Absolutely. So I do recommend Shy Trans Banshee. I've not seen many people talking about this one. I think more people certainly should do. This was just so much fun. I give it a 4.5 stars out of 5. I am very, very excited to see what's paranormal creature adorns the face of book 3. But that's it from me. That's my thoughts on Shy Trans Banshee by Tony Santorella. Have you read this or Book 1 Board Gay Werewolf? Or have you heard of these? Planning on checking them out? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you all very soon.